Chatta. Chatta.
Book club.
Welcome to book club.
Hi, chat.
How's it going, guys?
Oh,
Shit.
did you say what?
What
was that?
Breaking news! Book club. Did you read the book?
Chat. Did you read? Is that my PC? Can you mute
Oh,
it?
do we need to
I
like?
can hear them.
Are we too backlit?
Chat. Did you read the book?
I have like 40 pages left, so you can be honest. If you didn't finish the
I
book,
also have a few pages
you can,
left.
you can be
Yes.
honest. There's no judgment. 70%, hell yeah. See,
Jeff,
good degrees.
you are lying. You did not read the book. I literally don't believe you at all.
Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
I listened to the audiobook. That counts.
Oh yeah.
I read
that
the whole
counts.
thing. Hell yeah.
I didn't do my homework.
Great big
32
poo, dude.
Guys,
I get it.
read it. I annotated. I wrote notes. I wrote notes.
Do you want a
notes.
little bit more?
For people who read it and didn't finish it, why didn't you finish? Just out of curiosity. I didn't finish because I didn't have enough time. I actually read it all and I'm dyslexic, so I surprised myself.
Respect.
Amazing!
That's amazing. That's a great accomplishment.
Thanks,
Respect.
Dan.
I was wondering if anybody
All
didn't
these
read it for like
resubs, thank
the
you.
content or like it was just kind of
You gotta
sad
hype
or,
it.
Thank
or
you.
like didn't have
This
a
was
free
a heavy
time.
read.
Yeah.
Got a
Didn't
Didn't
24
comprehend it
month
at all.
sub.
Okay, this is gonna be an interesting chat.
Yeah. Woo!
Chat. We have donuts. You guys don't.
Way too many tangents.
I'll share with you.
Yeah.
Felt like reading a high school
But
assignment.
yeah, I want.
I know, yeah.
That's fair.
I never read
I
the
feel
final chapters of
validated.
this, which is not something I
This
liked,
was-
not because it was sad or anything. Started late and had a hard time getting into it.
it?
Do you guys want to hear something crazy? Is
that's
I
fair.
purchased this
That's
this,
perfect, thank
this copy of this book over 10 years ago.
Yeah. No.
I
And,
got mine 9
For you,
years
Kat.
ago.
I read the first couple chapters and
Oh,
did not get into it. And then it was the first book that got selected for book club, so I said, okay, I'll read it this time. And it is not the type of book that I would typically read, but
Read it once.
I did like it more than I thought I would.
I straight up read
So
this
that's
once
fun.
on a plane, only because I kind of forced myself to read it on a plane. And then
Yeah.
I remember why I never picked
Evan!
up and sold the book.
Evan.
Thank you.
Evan,
Okay.
so nice.
That's
Wait,
so
can I have one?
nice.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks.
Oh, heck yeah.
Thank you.
I got my phone. Yeah.
Well, we have this now.
Sick.
I got my copy of it like 5 years ago as a joke because LOL, you hate birds. Okay, well, listen.
Listen.
Do you
Here we go.
do you hang around Alveus and still hate birds?
Rude.
Because a lot of our ambassadors are birds.
Wait, who said that?
Who said?
Mr. Held.
Marge.
Mods, you know what to do.
Time him out.
Well, what'd you guys think?
Overall,
Yeah.
I don't want to read it again. 2 times enough.
Yeah.
It took effort to get through for me.
Me too.
Same.
Yeah, and I kind of felt guilty about that at first, and then like you guys all kind of hinted that was your experience too, and I felt a lot better about that.
Yeah.
It felt like a really long poem to me.
Yes.
You
That's
can
a good way of
definitely
describing
tell
it.
she's a scholar
Yes.
And
with the way
100%.
she wrote. Like,
Yeah.
It wasn't storytelling. It was more like, here's the facts. Here's my opinion.
Yeah.
Pumpkin Panda,
See,
thank you for the $50
I almost
donation.
feel the opposite. I feel like it was heavily romanticized. Like
Yeah.
everything in it was very like
I think-
sweeping.
It was
Do you
almost
mean
like
like the
she was
term-
like trying.
And-
Do you mean the terminology? Like sometimes some of her like vernacular was just very like
You could just tell.
academic and
You
Yeah,
got to
but-
lay
but
off
I
the
agree with
thesaurus
that.
for a little bit.
You could
Yeah.
tell she was a professor
Yeah.
and like she was trying to write a book
Yeah. But I get
for the general public.
But I agree with you.
I don't
Kayla,
think-
it was romanticized.
I don't
like,
think it was for the general public. I think it was like
Yes.
there's a target audience for this book.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it hard to get through.
Yeah.
And I don't think the target audience was animal people.
No.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Which is like
I
what
don't
caught
think it
me
was
off
either.
guard.
Yeah.
But it almost like had to be because there are like Falconry terms in there that she doesn't
That's
explain.
true. Yeah, I know
Like,
someone in chat
There's
just said that
some
too.
that she like does, like she'll go into it a little bit, but then like the more you get into it, the more she's almost assuming that like you
people
also know this
Exactly.
information.
It's hard to like rate. I usually have a hard time like when something's like a memoir or a biography, just because like rating someone's like life experience feels like weird to put like a star to like on Goodreads.
Yeah.
But
That's
personally, I struggled with this one. Like it, like Maya said, it was very like articulated, just like a poem. It was, yeah, that was beautiful, and her description of grief and loss and like unhealthy coping mechanisms of like self-isolation through those things was like very beautiful. But I found like the intertwining of that with like White's story over however many chapters, it just was a little repetitive. Like it felt to me a little repetitive. So I was starting, just like as I was progressing through the book, I felt like I was kind of falling off because some of the experiences. I also liked learning about White, and I got what she was trying to do with the like Shruti and I kind of briefly mentioned without talking about it and having a pre-book club, the parallelisms between his experience and hers. But I almost felt like there was a way to intertwine that without making it a biography on White as well. So yeah.
I think, to piggyback off of that, I think when the first time that White's story was introduced, I expected there to be a point, like, immediately, like, why she was bringing White into the story, to her story. And then, like, as the book goes on, you just realize that it's literally just these two stories parallel, and there's not not a specific, like, this is why I'm telling it. It's just, like, here are the...
Yeah, here's his story, here's my story.
And, like, here... Yeah, it was a...
Rather than woven in,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
It was almost like a dual timeline of her, like, going over his work.
I think I
I've
would have
never
liked
felt
it.
like I have to do too much research.
I think I would have liked it as a short story. Like I feel like I would have liked it as like a
short story.
like a thin like
Not
Yeah.
280
200
Yeah,
pages
maybe,
less.
I was like, maybe cut it in half and we got something.
they're called
Yeah.
Zoomers. Oh, you're talking about Sham.
Didn't she tell it
I was
because
like,
his
my
book was a
attention span's not
massive
that bad.
influence on them as a teen? Yeah, I think that's definitely why she told the White story.
Yeah.
I just didn't ever feel like it was like it meshed completely
Yes.
with their own story.
Yeah.
There were times where the transitions were just like boom, boom.
Like
And
that's it just felt like the stories were being told next to each other,
Mhm.
but not necessarily like there was like a
yeah.
I don't know, because I had a really hard time reading White's story as well from the perspective of a person who's trained birds,
Yes.
because the methodology that was discussed
I literally
literally put me through I was
literally everything what not to do.
I was
literally
like
wrote Goss
near
down.
tears at some point. Like the parts where they talked about how the bird wouldn't come, so he
So you
just
just dragged
yanked
it.
the crayon.
Yeah.
I was like I was like, I don't know if
Yes.
I can do that.
Yes.
All I know about White now is that he sucks. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was tough. And then towards like the part where they wrote that he was going to get another goshawk, I was like, no.
Yeah.
Trying so
Please
hard,
don't
and I
subject
was
another
like,
hawk to this man. I was not
Yeah.
prepared to read anymore. I found it interesting that she decided to get a hawk as a way to process her grief. Like, girl, please pick another thing to progress it.
I think she was a falconer.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
She
She
was
was bored
already a
at them.
falconer.
Somebody mentioned her pronouns. Does she use they, she, they?
She, they.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah, it almost felt okay, so learning about White's background and his trauma and self-identity crisis during that time and all of these things and alcoholism and his parents, like reading about that, like just the human experience of all those traumas, like yes, it can impact you, but it's just clearly like utilizing, and they mention this a few times, or she mentions this, like the lessons that are learned from this experience, but it almost felt like, because she also did it in a way where she would get kind of like frustrated, and she mentions that a few times, or like finding herself through these experiences with Mabel, but it's like, but at what cost to the animal? Like, are they a lesson for you to like experience these things, these human emotions? To like what extent is the purpose of their existence for you to garner those like realizations?
You can definitely tell she was working through her grief and depression in not a healthy way, and she was hyper focusing on training Mabel because she became so infatuated with the fact of this type of hawk to be like.
I can understand the hyperfixation on falconry, and I don't think like reading how she and Mabel progressed in their relationship, none of that made me uncomfortable as somebody who works with birds. Like I wasn't like, oh wow, this is a bad idea. Like
there's some things
but
like,
I can understand in the processing of grief reaching for something as an anchor and just like holding on for dear life. So like I understand that, and like at no point did I feel like Mabel was like mistreated at all.
No, 100%.
So I was okay with like I understood that part of the story and how falconry was like an anchor in her grief. I get
That's a really good point. Mabel with Helen treated well, never felt maybe uncomfy about that situation, but obviously maybe White.
No, she
White
did everything wrong.
Yeah.
Helen did everything for the most part right.
Which I was really excited to hear from the perspective. I know some of you have mentioned it in chat already that somebody said thank you for a modern perspective because like I don't know as much about birds, but I was really interested to hear from people who have not trained birds how you felt about reading this book. I was really fixated on the training part because that's what I love about birds. And reading this book, it was really alarming to like read a lot of like I know the old methodology and like I knew a lot of the falconry terms already. I knew about waking. That's how I was taught about keeping a bird on the fist and not sleeping. It was called waking when it was taught to me. So I was just curious about people.
Tortilla said she used the hell out of that animal. The hawk's well-being and experiences were tertiary, not even secondary to her goals, which I was surprised by because I had the same thing. I was like, I didn't think she did that hawk dirty.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of felt that too. And I guess that's me maybe coming from not a falconry background, and I guess it challenged what I see as ethical pet ownership in today and like moving forward. And for me, it's something mutually beneficial. Like it benefits you. Like getting a pet is slightly a selfish thing because like I know someone was saying how it emotionally, like it helps us out. But I guess in my head, there's a benefit for the animal as well. And I think I was having a hard time grasping what the benefit to Mabel was with their relationship. I don't feel that way about like rescue birds, obviously, or anything like that. But like that's the part that I struggled with.
Yeah.
And like also not for like a conservation purpose. It was, I very much felt like the benefits were kind of one-sided with this particular story.
I feel like if you talk to anyone who's a falconer, and I'm not speaking for all falconers by any means, but I think if you were to ask anyone who has a bird for this purpose to hunt with that bird, they would never call it a pet. They would be so affronted if you use the word
and I didn't mean to say pet either, like agreed, but ethical animal ownership is I guess what I meant to say.
That bird is serving more of a purpose than like enjoyment and entertainment. Like that is their partner.
For people and for a lot of people, they also eat the quarry that their bird catches.
And I think
it is a more
that can be argued
as
hunt.
Yeah,
I do agree. Hunting is a way more ethical way of getting your food, but I would imagine a large portion of the population is getting, and like even she talks about it in her book how, I forgot where, but like some of the reasons that people do get hawks, like they see a lot of the qualities that they wish they had in their hawks. So I guess I'm not questioning exactly her, but just with any kind of animal, like a lot of times I do question their purpose in getting that animal. Like with the reptile world, like a lot of times it's for the person and not, again, not a mutually beneficial thing. It's not for the animal either. It's for kind of like an internal purpose. So hunting is one thing,
I have a
especially if you
genuine
come from like an
question.
indigenous, culture.
Yeah.
Is one thing. Rescue is one thing. But again, just for me, for this particular story, I was struggling to see why you would.
Are falcon because I really don't know falconers today. I did briefly look it up, but I just wanted to know if you guys know. Are they more like raised in captivity or utilized from human care versus now going into the wild? And obviously that was that like an old way of doing it, like catching a bird and being like, now I'm going to become a falconer? Or is that, does it depend
where you're from?
Okay, because culturally I'm assuming like in certain places too it could be different.
And it depends on how advanced of a falconer you are. Like you can't be a novice falconer and be like, I'm going to go out and get this bird right now. Like that's not something that you can do.
Okay.
So like in the United States,
you do have to take a test and get licensed.
And in the United States, I think you're only really supposed to start with either a red tail or a kestrel.
Okay.
So in your first years of, in the beginning, you have to trap a juvenile.
Okay.
With the intent that that bird will be released back into the wild when you are done.
So
birds of prey have a really high mortality rate. Most of them don't make it to their second year. Over 50% of them do not survive to see their second.
So one could maybe even argue that this is a means of like...
It's a means of training the hawk how to hunt to better ensure their survival after they survive their first year. So alongside the human, they don't have to worry about not finding food. So food is always provided in some capacity. And then after, your seasons are done, and you feel the bird can sustain itself, you release that bird.
Interesting. Okay.
Correct me firm. That's what you did with Bean.
Bean was injured, so he was a rehab
rescue.
case.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is really interesting. Evan a while back said the hawk was the embodiment of grief and her coping mechanism for her dad's passing. And then at the end, when she dropped Mabel off at the aviary for the spring, it was the end acceptance and like moving on from him passing. And yeah, I noted that a lot too, like the transitionary periods in her life of like, I wrote like a lot of the times like loss and processing and healing. Like when she starts, I can't remember where exactly in the book, but she starts like, it's like getting ready for his memorial. Yeah, so she starts like remembering things about, just living life with him and experiences in a way where she's able to note it without immediately following it up with like immense grief and like isolating comments of just like going inward. And so I was writing that was like the beginning of her healing journey.
It gave her a purpose. And so instead of just like wallowing in that grief and diving more into depression like that she like clearly was in, it was a way for her to like get up in the day. It gave her small goals within the day.
Yeah. It
to
also,
someone who has lost their father, like having something to look forward to helps tremendously.
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely liked how you could see the transition of like her being like very self-isolating and almost when her friend wants to come over and there's a part in the book where she's like, she got upset. She was like, go away. And then like reintegrating in with people because there's like a point where she's out with Mabel and this guy just naturally, because people are naturally going to look over, right? Mm-hmm. And then she's like immediately annoyed, but then before she steps in, she turns to look back. Yeah, and she like connects with humanity again. So it's almost like she's able to become herself and like be out in the world, and then also integrate that with her passion of falconry in a healthy way, like because she's able to move on from that loss. Yeah, but yeah, I agree, Evan.
Mr. Held said they don't go into the book. However, her dad was a legend in the photography over here, and he's from over there. His pictures are still revered, so it's a large shadow left by him. So that's cool. I was actually like her describing her dad's pictures. I kind of wanted to see him.
Like at the funeral, like how there were like a dozen like famous photographers there saying like how he like shaped their career.
I think it's also
kind of cool.
I really want to, at the risk of getting into a conversation that is maybe a little bit dicey, in terms of keeping birds to hunt, touching on an experience that I've had in the past. I think a lot of people, it's very easy to romanticize the life of a bird.
Yeah.
So birds are not animals that we see, really, that we focus on, like especially birds of prey. They're very elusive. A lot of people are scared of them, and that's why, like, when we talk about birds,
Give your hot take.
Having birds, not having a very high survival rate in their first year. Many of them die of starvation. And you don't see it because, and we could get into talking about, like I know somebody said that they were confused about weights and the weights and why that's so important for training birds to hunt. It's very easy, I think, to just see birds flying. And like that's something that you get a lot when people go see birds in human care as well. Like, oh, do they get to fly? Do they get to fly? And that's like the pinnacle for some people of bird care is knowing that those birds get to free fly when 90% of the time they're sitting around doing nothing. They're sleeping.
Like
so
that.
for a bird in human care that still gets to free fly, gets to hunt, which is what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And then gets a place that's safe to sleep at night.
Yeah.
That bird has nearly everything it could possibly need. Literally. So when I was in Nepal, for example, we cared for a few non-releasable vultures and a few kites, and somebody came to stay at Maya Devi where we were kind of our home base, and we didn't have a place for them to stay. We said, sorry, all of our rooms are booked up. We don't have a place to put you. And she said, that's okay. I'd probably just set all your birds free overnight anyway. And my boss, who was he was a falconer, he's from the UK, and one of the first things he told me was that you'll never meet a more opinionated group of people than falconers, and that every single one of them thinks they're doing it right. And if you're not doing it their way, then you're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. He was very calm, which was a surprise.
Yeah.
And he said, do you want to ask me any questions about these birds?
Yeah.
And she said, no. And he said, okay. And that's one of like those pivotal conversations I think in my life that I just like, it was such a moment for me that like people aren't willing to ask questions about the lives of these animals. They just think that releasing them into the wild. And so many times I've heard the phrase, at least they would die with dignity.
Oh, yeah.
And it is just like such a tough thing to hear.
Rather see an animal dead.
You would rather see an animal and not just die. Like we're talking about
the worst
suffer.
way.
like suffer.
It's like the worst imaginable death that is like being forced upon them because you think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So there are certainly people who keep birds. Like half the time you see these like videos of people that have owls and they're like touching them a bunch, and like that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. They don't like that.
Yeah, no, they don't want that. They don't like that.
Yeah, I definitely saw that. Also, she was comfy because, like, I wrote one part, play behavior, cute.
I know, she played fetch with her, and I was like, just like tossing a little ball. I was like, oh my god, that's the cutest thing in the world.
I think what I was saying earlier, too, like, obviously felt that way about White, and maybe even with Helen, maybe sometimes I got confused. I wrote beside this a quote I've heard before, like, healing is not linear. But when she says, I was furious with myself when I realized that first great error on the train. But the second realization brought self-hatred. I'd been so blind, so miserable. I had not seen my hawk was miserable too. I had not seen her at all. Mm-hmm. I remembered the man I'd fallen for after my father died. I'd hardly known him, but it didn't matter. I'd recruited him to serve my loss, made him everything I needed. No wonder he had run away. And now I'd made the same mistake again. I'd fled to become a hawk, but in my misery, all I had done was turn the hawk into a mirror of me. And I think while discussing it now, like all of this now, I like understand that sentiment a little bit better. I think maybe I misread that at first, like, because she does recognize through her like experience and like swimming through this grief that like, and you're not perfect. Like, no one's ever going to be perfect. And it doesn't mean Mabel was like, she rectifies this. Like, she understands and, like, is like, okay.
A lot of times when you are that depressed because you lost someone so important in your life, you cling on to whoever you think embodies their presence in you. And, like, if you think, you could be thinking you're doing the right thing and being like, oh, he's just like so-and-so, like, he's replacing this deep hole in my heart. Yeah. And you're not realizing that's never gonna happen. Yeah. Like, you can't fix that hole because that hole is irreplaceable.
Yeah. It'll live alongside you.
Yeah. Juggling, I feel exactly the same way. Hearing her narrate the book was really cool for me. I actually think that everyone who reads this book should listen to it as an audiobook because it is narrated by the author. And I think
that's cool.
hearing them say the words as they wrote them is like, it made all the difference for me listening to the book.
Yeah. I feel, well, we've already said it. I genuinely, like, I think it's beautiful how she shares with us that experience.
It's very vulnerable of her.
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable experience.
It takes a lot of, like...
Yeah. Like, I recognize that. I feel bad following up with what we said earlier, that, as a short story, I probably would have been like, whoa, solid.
But she is brave, and she does share a lot of feelings that I think a lot of people would feel guilty about even having. So it's definitely like a very vulnerable thing for her to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I did appreciate, as somebody who has trained birds, revealing the difficulties of training birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. There were a lot of quotes about birds specifically in this book that I was like very much like, yes. I just opened up to this page, but it says, it's made them a powerful symbol of wildness in myriad cultures and a symbol, too, of things that need to be mastered and tamed. And again, I think that just speaks to, like, birds being this unknowable thing, because we just don't see them. So, like, these elusive creatures that people don't see as often are often the ones that people are like, I want to have it, and I want to, like, covet it, and I want to know everything about it. And I think it was just... There were a lot of quotes like that I was like, I've definitely had those feelings about birds, not needing to master or tame them, but like, like associating birds. I think more birds of prey. I would not all birds. The parrots are different, but associating birds with a kind of wildness that is a little bit different, and like because it is a little bit unknowable. Like building a relationship for me with a bird is very different.
My favorite part, or like most relatable part of her working with that bird was, I think Birds of Prey has been like the most humbling experience that I've had with training animals, because like we love them so much, you know, we love all animals so much, and with Birds of Prey, especially her, she's got this like reverence for this bird. Like, she's like she is God, like she's obsessed with this bird, and then she flies her too high one day, and she's just like, she's ignoring me, she doesn't care, like she just doesn't care about you in the same way.
Puts you in your place.
It's so humbling. It's like, wow, what an amazing thing to like love something so much, and for them to, I mean, it's just not the same.
I think the way that we have to love them is so different because there is no outlet for it.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that the bird likes that we can give them other than food.
Right.
So like how we show them we love them is in fact by giving them the space and the respect and the time to, you know, all of these things. So it's just really...
I'm glad we talked about this because I think it gave me another insight other than like hunting. Like you said, Kayla, like I didn't really think about their numbers in the wild and like getting through that juvenile period.
It's interesting. I think there's, I don't know, the whole... It's a really big conversation. I think it's cool when she like takes Mabel and goes and like teaches people about her. I think it helps a lot when there's like an educational component, like with what we're doing, as opposed to like private ownership in falconry is like a whole separate conversation.
She did use Mabel for like outreach and conservation.
But yeah, I think that's really neat. She obviously wrote this book and like taught a bunch of people about birds and made them see them in a different way. So I think that's really important too.
My favorite quote was right near the beginning when she's talking about watching the wild birds of prey and the way they draw patterns in the sky with their flight. Yeah.
I remember her talking about
I think maybe this is one of those like really hits you hard moments, but when she says she's talking about her mental health and she says the kind of madness I had was different, it was quiet and very, very dangerous. And then she says normal grief, you know, they call it, which was just so interesting, like, because you're navigating the world as everyone else is just living their normal lives, doing their normal thing, and then you're like feeling this loss. And having to...
There's a word for that.
Yeah, there is a word for it, and it's escaping me right now. But...
A word for what, sorry?
There's a word for, like, the acknowledgement that everyone else that you see is experiencing, like, their own traumas and pain and lives at the same time that you are. Huh?
Is it like a German word or something? Like something bizarre?
Chat, help us out.
Chat,
do you know what word we're talking about?
Also, you know when she talks about how gosses are nervous, highly strung birds, but, like, she's also talking about how a lot of the info she's read is from, like... men that
Sonder.
have long been dead for
Is it
hundreds
Sonder?
of years.
Yeah.
Sonder.
But then, we come to find that, like,
Thank you.
in the treatment of Mabel, it's not seemingly that, like, they're stubborn and, like, there's an air to them that's, like, very humbling. But I guess I had a question about, like, are Gosses generally not, like, are they for more experience because they're on the other end of that spectrum of being very, like...
Fun fact, I was
do what
actually
I
talking
want.
to Lucas about this morning. So I started learning about birds in Alaska. I was volunteering at a place called Bird TLC right before I went out to Nepal. And I went through all of that. No! I went through the training, and there was a list of birds that we could pick from to start our training, and one of them was a goss named Duchess, and she is the one that I was drawn to immediately. And I don't know what that says about me after reading this book.
I'm going to throw this away.
Wait, that's
But
funny.
no, everything that I've read about goshawks is supported by that fact. A large, I think, part of when you hear about different birds and their general, like, if you could generalize their demeanors, obviously when we talk about birds, we talk about them the same way that we talk about any animal, which is that, like, generalizations are dangerous the same way that they always are, and that, like, an individual is an individual no matter the species. And you're gonna get peregrine falcons that are angels, and you're gonna get peregrine falcons that are
makes sense, because remember
that
the
are
part
nervous,
where she picks
depending
Mabel,
on
and the
there's
other
just a
individual
difference
was
between
like,
those two birds.
whoa, can I actually have that one?
They are individuals, but obviously they're shaped by how they're handled, and obviously White's bird is also an example of that as well. But there are birds, like when you're talking about, like, for example, if you're training a bird like a red-tailed hawk, that's a large-bodied bird. There aren't a lot of birds that hunt it when it reaches adulthood, so when you take it out, it might be less nervous because it's the top of the food chain. But if you're hunting with a kestrel, that's a small bird that's hunted by other birds, so they are geared to be alert all the time. I don't know much. I've never worked with a goss, and I'd have to look at like if there's any threats to them or why they might be that way. They are quite elusive birds. They're forest hunters. So
who showed me that video of them
that was
flying?
me.
Yeah, that was cool.
The way that she picked the bird was really interesting too, and it reminded me of and maybe I'm wrong. It reminded me of when people are looking to buy horses, and there are some people that go into buying horses being like big time horse girls that like have watched a lot of horse movies, and they expect this like love at first sight, like
this
deep
magical
connection.
moment.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with like the breed of the horse or like the training of the horse or like the matchup at all. Like people will go in and just be like, I feel it.
Yeah,
and it kind of reminded me of that when she picked the bird. I was like, I don't know if there's anything substantial there or if this is just you trying to cling to something.
I feel like she kind of dives into that, but not directly, because sometimes that was another thing is she brings up things and points and realizations or like a truth about herself, but I feel like I wish she had dived into some of that soul searching more.
Yeah, where she's like,
because she kind of brought that up when she had that moment choosing Mabel, and then all the frustration along the way of having those being humbled, like you said. Like, oh, it's not like this like animal that just looks like, I choose you.
Yeah, she was like, but that's not my hawk.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Interesting.
This kind of piggybacks off of Kayla, like the part that you read, how like people have this kind of drive to know more about something that is like elusive and unknown. But towards the end of the book, I forgot when she's talking about. I think she's at the art gallery, but I could be wrong.
she mentioned condors. I got excited.
I think it was there, but she said,
cool.
and this is specifically a question for Chad. I want to see what you guys feel about this. She's wrote, I couldn't love or understand hawks as much as I do if I'd only ever seen them on screens. And I feel like that's very applicable to here because you guys are viewing our animals on screens. But like the thing that I really, really like about here is that you guys get to know the animals as much, if not more than we do, because you guys are watching them constantly. And I feel like you guys love and understand these animals quite a bit. So how did you guys feel about that? Her saying like, I don't think I would have been able to understand them as much if I would just been like watching them as people who watch these animals.
And maybe do you think it has something to do with the context that you see them in? Like, Like
For
watching
sure.
like a nature documentary where
Yeah.
you see a
That's what I was
wild,
gonna say.
blue-fronted Amazon versus seeing siren. Is there a difference in how you perceive those two
Parasocial
experiences?
friend.
Yeah.
I do think it's so
Yeah.
different. Yeah, I there's so many different screens mean so many things.
Yeah,
Like
ours
a
is
nature
very
documentary is so
uncurated.
different from like, here's Georgie, this is his favorite food. You know?
Yeah.
Here's him staring.
Does it
24 hours.
change, like, because you also have our perspective talking about how much we respect and how we love them? Does that change things for you?
Ooh, what an interesting. Yeah.
Oh gosh,
Oh,
There's
so
like
fast.
there's another layer here because you're able to like there's like an interaction component and like animal chats and versus like somebody said like just watching a nature documentary or like yeah.
She didn't watch animals on screens for enough hours.
Yeah.
And also times are different from, obviously, from white to her to where we are at now.
Yeah, she's also never seen Georgie ride a roller coaster, so like,
That's so true.
yeah.
I don't know. I love wombats. I don't know that I've ever actually seen one in person.
Fucking love wombats.
But I love them. I know that I love them. Also, an experience with just like doing education outreach. I have absolutely seen more connection from chat, and maybe it's just like quantity of time too that they spend with the animals parasocially.
Yeah.
The connection is way greater than like any classroom I've gone to, where a kid, even if they're excited about the animal, like it's
Yeah.
the longevity is nowhere near the same.
Not to diverge too much, but we kind of quoted this earlier, but can we talk about how, like, as I'm learning more about falconry, and I know the author uses she, they, but as well as just having a more, I don't know, like, girl power, man, because when she's talking about all these old dudes, you know, projecting onto their hawks all the male equalities that they thought threatened by modern life, wildness, power, independence, and strength. At the same time, they could exercise their power by civilizing a wild and primitive creature. Masculinity and conquest. Like, man, that's toxic masculinity.
What page is that?
79.
Hold on.
Yeah,
I think I actually like have that
F
like
you
written
up.
down
But
too.
then anyway, she kind of talks about for white too falconry.
I literally wrote men
falconry.
ruin everything.
Yeah.
I think you know
Involves
what?
strange
Where is it?
productions.
Where is it?
But of very different qualities. And I just thought that was really interesting.
I marked that.
You know what's funny
I
is
literally,
that like when you read
I
that part
literally
too,
wrote men ruin everything.
like
at that
I saw
exact same
those
passage.
19th century falconers were projecting onto their hawks all the male qualities they thought threatened by modern life: wildness, power, virility, independence, and strength. Sorry, I'm like thinking at the same time. I'm processing.
yeah.
No, you're good.
Strangely enough, those are all also qualities that I associate with women. So,
Yeah, no, like,
yeah.
but I think you can, yeah, that's the interesting thing is that they are given, like, that is just something that they have, I don't know, easier, what am I trying to say? You guys don't know what I'm trying to say because it's in my brain. They are, no, it's just like, it's something that, yes, we contribute or like want to attribute to women, harder to be that without being told you're bossy or you're this or you're that, right? So having those qualities and taking charge of them, but also not inflicting
see that
like
comment,
poor
Shorty?
care by having and being a
Difference
part
between
of
men and
falconry.
women who train
Yeah.
dogs.
Because, you know, obviously white maybe sought some of those different qualities through not healthy means, if that made any sense.
Mhm.
I think I'm fading and I'm gonna eat another donut.
I thought you were like continuing a quote, and I was like, huh.
Yeah. Yeah, like the elite class. There's also like a sense of classism there too, and not
Yeah.
just gender.
Somebody said, I also thought the section where she was having the epiphany about the way Mabel and goshawks, female hawks in general, have been depicted as irrational and all of that was sick. Yeah, that was when the guy that she went to.
Yeah. And she's
yeah,
like, Mabel,
and
you're
he
a
was like,
woman.
it's a gendered thing, and she was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
I literally like, I'm pretty
Like,
sure it's like
because
right-
we're
Yeah.
both females, we've had an easier time of this. That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, like it says like, the very first like paragraph of chapter 6. It literally says like hiding to nothing. My old friend Martin Jones had said, and he raised both hands in the air and a gesture half of speculation. Nope, supplicable, blah blah blah, and half exasperation. It's like banging your head against a wall. Don't do it. It'll drive you mad. I kept thinking of what he said as I drove. Clutch into 4th gear. This is her like going to go pick up the hawk. Roundabout, change down. Fierce acceleration, slight resentment. I didn't want to think of all the things the men had told me. It'll drive you mad. Leave Gosshawks to the Gosshawk boys. Get something more sensible. And I literally wrote rude.
Which is also funny because like she tells the story of her training her hawk next to a man who completely failed at training his hawk.
Mhm.
That is true. That is true. He did lose him.
Yeah. So can we also talk about the stress of like them being like that bird had all its equipment on?
I know. Yeah.
Crayons on it.
Gosh almighty, I can't. The amount of stress that I have for a bird that is no longer alive. Like there's no chance of that.
Yeah,
like,
he's so dead. He's
What?
Not
so,
lived
so
very
far.
long, and it hurts me.
It's so long.
It was a lot. I was not okay.
Wait, there's a passage that I wanted to read.
I also really like the talks about training the birds and being invisible. All the talk about being, I was like,
Yes.
this is totally, I get it. I so get it.
I kind of wrote something about that too. On like page 85, she talks about just like overthinking literally every movement that you're making around this animal, especially at the beginning. And I was just like, that's just relatable with Aquila right now, because you just are so hyper aware of just like every single thing your body's doing because you're trying not to fuck things up with this animal who's a little nervous. Not anymore though. He's doing great.
Hooray! Did this book bring anyone closer to raptors? Did it help you understand them as a species a bit more? For me, I don't feel like it did. I got like, it was cool the way she described the birds, and it like made me remember how much I think of them, or like,
It made me miss
that was a
them.
weird way to phrase that, but you know, like I think a lot of them is what I mean.
Yeah.
So it was like I miss like the feeling of looking at a bird and being like, oh my god, that is like holy shit, that's cool. But I think that was all. I don't know. I feel closer to them.
I think I've always just been in awe of birds. Like, I don't think I ever thought that my life would bring me to a place that I am currently in working with birds. Like, they were never an animal that I was like, I would like to work with them.
Yeah.
And now I think I just am in awe of them all the time. It's like when we went to like World Bird Sanctuary and I got to hold Alejandro, I was like, I love him.
Yeah.
I would die for this bird. I've known him for 5 seconds, but I would die for him.
Oh, Mr.
But I would
Squeakon.
die.
I love Mr. Squeakon.
Yeah, it definitely made me more curious. Like, I've always wanted to work with more birds of prey. But, yeah.
I have a question for you guys. On page 66, I'm talking with my mouth full, sorry, but not really. On page 66, she describes the hawk's breath as smelling like pepper,
Oh my god, I'm stoked to talk about this.
pepper,
Oh my god, I was in
That
it.
is such
She
a
nailed it.
visceral-
and burnstone. Really?
I
That
was
is
in
a
it.
visceral-
Yeah,
that is
Shirley,
Also-
you know me. I take Tico and Miley's feathers in the basket. I'm like,
Yeah, but also though, like not all
Is it
birds, right?
different?
Peregrine
Not-
falcons.
But burnstone?
oh, bad?
Disgusting.
Wait,
I
what?
thought- yeah,
Burnt
when I
what?
read that, I
There
was like,
is a
damn, that's.
very
I don't know how I
particular
would have
smell.
described that.
Every time someone describes it, it immediately comes back.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says
Yeah.
Smell it
pepper,
once,
musk,
you will
and
never forget
burnstone.
it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, good to know.
Well, I
Never
guess I'm just gonna have
forget
to
that smell.
puff some bird of prey.
And like the
some
heat.
more.
Wait.
The heat that you feel,
Yeah,
that's like
and
a
the way
very
they-
like,
It's
it just is
it
it's
permeates.
yeah, it's just there.
Yeah.
It's
Hot-
just there.
hot
Like
breath?
when birds
Oh my
are
God.
breathing in your face.
Literally, just having. Oh my god! I remember Penny doing this. She literally would just stare at me with her mouth open and just. And I'm just like, girl, stop. Please.
Oh no! What if I'm like a weirdo?
Where was the description,
You'll-
Trudy?
you
It was on
like
page
now.
66.
Just wait.
It's at the. It's towards the end of 66.
Yeah, the goshawk is staring at me in mortal terror, and I can feel the silences between both our heartbeats coincide. Her eyes are luminous, silver in the gloom. Her beak is open. She breathes hot hawk breath in my face.
Yep.
It smells of pepper and musk and burned stone. Her feathers are half
username.
raised, and her
Hot
wings
hawk
half
breath.
open, and her scaled yellow toes and curved black talons grip the glove tightly. It feels like I'm holding a flaming torch. I can feel the heat of her fear on my face. She stares, and stares. That feeling of like, and that's right before she talks about what it means to become invisible, because in that moment, like, we even talked about a little bit about this with Aquila, why we minimized our presence around him that first day, and you know, it was very brief, because in the beginning, you are a source of discomfort, and
You are the stressor.
you are the stressor. So like,
Yeah.
how do you become
We kinda
invisible
used the
in
good
those
ones.
spaces,
Oh, I thought that
and
was
as
really
non-threatening
cool.
as
Working on
possible
that?
is a really
Sorry,
interesting.
this is not important. I'm so sorry. Are you working on that?
No, go
or
ahead. It's in the box. If it's in
Okay.
the box, it's fair game.
I like how she
It was
talked
not
about
important
becoming
enough to stop
invisible.
the
Yeah.
conversation.
Because I
Yeah.
think that is what I was not able to articulate too, like versus like the male dominance, like just assertion of like I own you. Like the fact that she approached it from that perspective of like, but to connect truly, while also being humbled occasionally because bird, is
They're
to
good at
be invisible. And once that moment happened and she had that Mabel kind of like quote unquote forgot her for a second, she was like, oh, it finally happened.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it
you know,
literally
none
is
of those.
the very last paragraph of the
Yeah.
chapter on 73. It literally just says, regarding the room with simple curiosity, she turned her head and saw me and jumped exactly like a human in surprise.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
felt like that was described in
And
a way
then
where
she was like, that was the moment.
yeah, like the people in her past, you know, or in the past with Falconry, like they didn't really talk about too much. And maybe that was a thing, but I just felt like she did a really good job of showing like the difference in like the parallelism between her care and the way that she was training versus
Yeah, she literally
how
says,
it had been.
the forgetting was delightful because it was a sign that the hawk was starting to accept me. But there was a deeper, darker thrill.
Yeah.
It was that I had been forgotten.
And I would soon have hot hawk breath.
And then I literally wrote, being forgotten is both a wanting and a curse to yourself, because like you want the bird to forget about you because
Yeah.
it means you've become safe, but then it also can like be to your detriment because then you're so hyper focused on being invisible that when it
Yeah.
like you need to eventually transition to being present with them, and it can be like where she said like it could startle them and then you become the stressor again.
Yeah.
I think it's also, to piggyback on that as well, the stressor of like when the bird finally got comfortable, the hood was no longer welcome,
Yeah.
which I really appreciated as somebody who
yeah.
has worked with birds and hoods. That
They
description
literally-
was
Yeah,
on the nose.
Yeah.
Literally, you're like,
Um,
you used to wear this. You wore it 5 seconds ago, and now it is the most terrifying
And now
thing.
you just, maybe it's not even terrifying. They're just like, I just don't want it. Like,
Yeah,
I
they
just don't
literally
want
are
it.
like, I'm
And like her, like talking about being like, I just need to put it on you because we're gonna go in the car, and that is going to be scary. Please, I'm like,
Yeah.
yes. One of the other things that I think is really neat to think about when you think about falconry is that like when you take a bird out to hunt, you take everything off that bird that like would tether that bird to you in any capacity, right? She
Yeah,
talks
that
about
would hinder
flying
them.
jesses. And flying jesses, like the birds could pull those out very easily. We've
Yeah,
we've
they're
worked
made-
with birds that have
yeah.
just yanked those dresses right out. There's nothing keeping
Not
them
even
in.
the ones that are made to be yanked out.
Yeah. So like when you release those birds, like there's nothing that like that could possibly force that bird to come back to that falconer out in the field. So once it hunts, it's truly like a moment of like that bird could choose to just go.
Yeah.
So the fact that they don't really speaks to the relationship I think that you can build with an animal that is literally as wild as it can be, I think,
Yeah.
in human care.
And then especially when she like mentions like how she, like when Mabel had like literally looked at her and then it just left because she was upper like higher in weight.
Yeah.
And she was like shit. She got comfortable with her being like having that connection, and then she got too comfortable to the point where she became not needed.
Yeah.
And that's like the point with falconry is like you don't want to be needed, but like if you're still wanting to like work with them, there's that fine balance, and she was teetering on it.
I've
I
always
think she
said,
mentions it.
I know somebody earlier was talking about being confused about bird weights. And And I know she made a good point in the book, too, when she was talking about training a Merlin, where she was like, I weighed that bird 3 times a day, and I could tell you how much it was going to weigh in an hour, in 2 hours, and 3 hours after it ate. And, like, that's a real thing.
That is a real thing.
That's a real thing that falconers
calorie counting is a real thing.
Who work with those very small birds have to be able to do, because literally fractions of a gram make all the difference for those small birds. But I've always, whenever I talk about birds, because it's hard to talk about birds in training realms, because there is still a perception that in order to get a bird to do anything, they have to be hungry in some capacity, and that's not how I like to talk about it.
Is that like more like an archaic way of thinking?
It is, yeah. And it doesn't work. That's the other thing that I think is really important. Or that a bird has to be starving in order to get it to do anything. And
the way White was describing how he was trying to train Goss is a really good example of that.
But he also was like, though, but like, I love him, so I want to feed him everything, which is also doing the opposite of getting that bird to do anything.
I get that part.
He didn't want to starve him, but then he had him so full that he physically couldn't fit anymore in him.
Yeah.
And then he was like, why is he not moving?
Yeah. So like birds in the wild, like they're not going to go hunt unless they need to eat. But there's also like when we used to talk about birds and talk to people about how we got them to flying weights and things like that, I just used to say that they were athletes, which is what they are.
I loved your description.
Yeah, so there's weights at which they are optimal for going out the furthest and seeking their food. And all birds are built to do different things. Like when you're looking at vultures outside, they're not built to do long, like they're not predatory birds primarily. They are opportunistic scavengers. So they're not built to do what goshawks are built to do or what peregrines are built to do. They're built to soar, which is why you can look up and you'll see vultures flying for miles and miles and miles without ever flapping their wings. That's what they're built to do. But for a bird like a goss that's a forest dweller, they've got to have a lot of power. So when they're carrying a lot of extra weight, they're not going to be motivated to fly because they don't need to. It's just going to cost them more energy to fly. It's like telling somebody that they need to run everywhere to get their next meal. Would you do it? No. But if you didn't do it for long enough and you lost too much weight, you physically wouldn't be able to run to your food anymore. So there's a weight that's too low for a bird, just the same that there's a weight that's too high for a bird. And once you get to that too low weight, if you make the mistake of thinking that that bird is too high and that's why it's not moving and you continue to limit their food, they're just going to die.
You're slowly starving.
Anyway, so that was an unnecessary tangent, I think. But
just some donka said, run to feed, guess I'll starve.
Yeah,
I get that.
But like eventually, like if you were like, oh no, I've waited too long and you physically now can't run.
Yeah.
Even if you've been like, well, wait, I do want to eat, you physically can't do that anymore.
Yeah, Shroom Prince was like, I feel like there's a similarity with what humans generally do with animals, like how overfeeding pets has become a problem and how some people think it's a good thing to starve them. Yeah.
It's very, it's a really interesting, it was really interesting to read about things like that. And I did wonder how it translated to people who haven't had that same experience with birds.
Chat, do you have thoughts about the conversations we've had or outside of the conversations that we've had?
We got in a lot of tangents.
I was just looking at the questions and I was like, we haven't actually specifically answered them, but I feel like we've addressed all of them.
I was just thinking that as I read through
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
I accidentally threw mine away because it got wet.
Many thoughts.
Can I see the 6 through 10 questions?
You don't. I threw them away.
Do you have 1, 5, 6?
No, there's 10. I have the other half, but my mom just spelled on them.
Oh, that's right.
Question, what did you think of the ending? It seemed premature to me. Didn't Evan say something about the ending being like a kind of like a closure piece? Yeah. It's like it may have felt premature, but it's also like it was the end of the season. Yeah. Like it was required that she put her up to molt, and so even if she wasn't like done doing whatever journey she was doing with that hawk, like you got to keep it moving, you know. That's kind of how I felt about it.
Says in the postscript or like in her acknowledgments that she still flew Mabel for many seasons, like after she wrote this, and the only reason why like she stopped was because she got Asper and unfortunately died.
No, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it says Mabel flew for many more seasons before a sudden, untreatable infection with aspergillosis.
Chat, aspergillosis is awful.
An awful airborne fungus carried her from her aviary to the dark woods where dwell the lost and dead. She is much missed.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. So like she even after this book, after her putting her up for her molt, like she still continued to hunt with her.
Yeah.
Like she didn't stop being with Mabel. Like she's not like she just like put her up and never came back to her. Like she continued to work with her.
Also, her ability to let go of Mabel, even like that was what was needed for Mabel and her care. Like it was kind of what Evan also, he touched upon this. It's basically the coming together of her coping and learning to cope with her grief, because it never does truly go away.
It was a cathartic. Moment.
Yeah, being able to move forward with both things.
There were some very powerful quotes about grief. I think that hit harder just because of the past couple of months that we've had here. And I think there was one specific area, because like I recently had like thought about grief, and I was like, I think maybe, I don't know, it just, you get to a point where you don't so much, I don't know, it kind of just carves you. That's kind of like how I've like started to process like with grief. You just like, it's just carving you as you get older. All of the different types of grief that you experience.
It's a whole that like it feels so deep and steep that you don't think you can get out of it, especially with like a loss like this.
Like there were a lot of things like breathing seemed like an act of discipline. I stared at the sun going down and the sun coming up and the sun in between, and like really like purposeful and like doing things with such intent, looking at things with such intent, like really again finding ways to like anchor yourself to a moment, because it just feels so weird to exist in a space where you're being hit so hard by something, but you know that other people are being hit by things too, but it just feels so isolating.
It is isolating. That's
because even though everyone is going through maybe their own thing, when you go through a loss that big,
when you go through grief, like the way I took my grief with my dad versus what my mom did versus what my sister did, I felt isolated just because they kind of connected over it. But Dad was my person. So going through that to the point where you're like, my person is gone. And then, I love talking about my dad, but it makes me sad. And then learning to accept that, like, he's gone, I can't talk to him anymore, I can't have these moments with him anymore. You do self-isolate to the point where you're like, well, now what? What's the point? What do I do since your person's gone? And then, like, you slowly just learn that, like, it's not just you going through it. Like, they also, like, my mom also lost her person. He was more her person than my person. But she had to step up because she had myself and my sister to, like, kind of keep her going. But, like, there were times when, like, I'd catch her crying in the bedroom because she's gone. Like, when the day we found out, like, she couldn't tell us. Like, she didn't tell us. It was my aunt that told us. Because she couldn't get the words out. She didn't want to accept those words. Because it meant her world changed. Our world changed. And then going through that change, you just have to kind of learn to deal with it, go with it, learn that, like, you're going to hit this moment where it just hits you to where you just, like, you think you're doing better, and then a moment happens, like, with the tank, like, it's fucking sucks right now, because this was mine and my dad's dream, was to have a saltwater tank. But having it now with you guys is basically the next best thing, because I can now live that dream, but with my other people. And then being able to actually, like, accept that and acknowledge that and realize that, like, your love in those moments just shift with you a different way really kind of like puts into focus that like, yes, I want him here. Yes, I want this moment. But like you just kind of have to like shift your brain to be like, just because he's gone doesn't mean it still can't happen. And being able to like have you guys to be able to like do this and to live with this. And I'm pretty sure like there were a lot of things in here that I was like, there was one point I like was quoting my dad in this book because there were moments when I was like, that's him. That's my dad. And then like at the very end when she was like, she found a key to an apartment that her dad left for her because he knew she would lose hers. And she did. And she was like, leave it to dad to like still help me after he's already gone. And I was like, I've had so many of those moments before. Yeah. Because mom was like, she's finally starting to share snippets of like, of my dad with us because she's finally realizing that like, we can handle it. Yeah. And like there, like one point, she was literally like, for me to go to Disney, my dad paid for it with one of his like, even though he had been gone for like 15 years at that point. We literally got a check in the mail from something that like he did before he got sick, and she was like, "It's not me, it's your dad." Yeah. And like just having those little moments like that, like it brings back their memory, and like having that memory of them and being able to like experience that memory is still, it just like, I think at one point I was like, to have grief means you loved them. Yeah. And if you don't have that grief, it means what you thought was there, like it clearly didn't affect you enough, and the fact that it affected her this much meant that she had a love that deep and a connection that deep that it truly meant something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she talks about like that indescribable like just grief, but then being lucky to have something. You know, and the little lessons, I do like how she plugs those in along the way of like patience too, like the lesson of patience.
I underlined that part where it was like he was teaching me patience.
Yeah, what a beautiful lesson too for a father to teach their child about like being out in nature and waiting. Like that's such a nice gift that does extend in your adulthood, because it's so easy as an adult to just get lost in the sauce and the grind, and then to have that heavy lesson of just like sitting out in nature and being patient and waiting. I just think that's very meditative and beautiful.
Such a contrast to like what you're so often like, you're like, oh, you'll be rewarded if you're working and you're doing and you're active and you're going, and then when you take yourself out, it really is about, when you're trying to observe these natural spaces, it's about how small you can make yourself. Yeah. And that's like, where you encounter the things that are the most rewarding.
Yeah, like those things that even though it's really hard.
Chat wants to know if they can hug you virtually, Lindsay.
Yeah. Because literally, thank you, Chat. Because literally at one point where she was describing how her dad was like taking pictures of all these planes and writing down every single thing, and she wrote, I went with him sometimes on Saturday mornings driving up to the Cotswolds to like take pictures of my dad, has like been my dad, but also like he was like talking about all this. I literally wrote hug it because that was a quote my dad always said when we would go on adventures. Mm-hmm. He would always like, because we would go down to the creek by our house, and it was like there was a bridge that you had to like walk under, and whenever we were walking, it was on the main road because country, and there were like guardrails, and every time a car came, he would yell at us to hug the guardrails. Mm-hmm. So like every time I pass a guardrail and like I see people like walking, I catch myself involuntarily being like, hug it. Yeah. Because do you guys like that's what my dad would do. Yeah.
Do you remember when she talked about finding the key, like to her dad's flat, at the end of the book? At the end of the book, she found a key that her dad cut to his flat, so she could like go to his flat that she had lost, and it just like turned up.
Yeah, I literally wrote, Dad always helping even when he's gone, like mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She said, I held the cardboard, maybe I don't have to read this whole thing. I held the cardboard and felt its scissor-cut edge, and for the first time I understood the shape of my grief. I could feel exactly how big it was. It was the strangest feeling, like holding something the size of a mountain in my arms. You have to be patient, he had said. If you want to see something very much, you just have to be patient and wait. There was no patience in my waiting, but much time had passed all the same and worked its careful magic, and now, holding the card in my hands and feeling its edges, all the grief had turned into something different. It was simply love. I tucked the card back into the bookshelf. Love you too, Dad, I whispered. That's very nice.
Yeah, and then I was like, you can't really grieve someone if you never truly loved them in the first place.
Yeah. That's
There's
really
another
nice.
quote that's a lot like that. I think it's just, what is grief if not love persevering?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Man, this chat definitely gave me a different perspective.
Me and Amanda were like, this is too fucking long.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine that this book was easy for you to read, Lindsay, or like anyone else in the chat. Because
It just goes to show, like, this discussion, first off, what a great first Alveus Book Club chat.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, it's been a really good discussion. But just goes to show how sometimes an experience, it's so subjective when reading something, and how, yeah, we all connect to different things
Yep.
in what we're reading, you know?
yeah.
Cool perspectives.
Yeah.
Violet just had a question. She was like, or they, I don't want to assume. As someone from England who recognizes a lot of the places mentioned, did you feel disconnected with the story at all? Because knowing the places she mentioned helped them imagine a lot of the book. Especially when she was like describing like the woods and like the Cotswolds and like
See, I actually felt like
Cambridge.
she was like really descriptive. I don't know. I didn't feel, but that's a good question. But I guess visually, like, yeah, I don't know what some of those places truly look like, but in my head, I was able to kind of like imagine or, yeah, depict in my head what I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought she did an okay job doing that.
Well, chatters, I hope those of you who read the book enjoyed the book and enjoyed our first book club, first discussion. Wahoo! Thank you guys for reading. I know we have a collage of pictures of people who have read their books at book club. And a lot of them have taken it outside to read it, so they're just like pictures of the book in front of wherever they are. And
I love that.
some of the covers of the book are in, I don't even know what other languages they're in, which is really cool to see.
Wait,
'cause-
really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, because
Okay.
they're all over the place.
So cool.
Is it posted?
Are we picking the next one today?
Yes.
Do we have the
Are
wheel?
we? Oh,
Yes, we have the
hype,
wheel.
okay.
Did we add books to the wheel?
If you would like to, now is the time. Like,
Also,
text it to me
I
right now.
would also like to say that anyone who
Oh, wait,
like
it's
did
not
not
posted.
enjoy this book for any reason, totally valid.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah. Any of these books. Yeah.
It was
Like-
a hard book.
Like listening to our discussion, like
posted earlier today.
I hope nobody feels like they're like, oh, what?
I don't think my comms with it were like the story or like anything like that. It was just the heavily romanticizing everything, which makes sense. She's a poet.
I did-
And just kind of like repetitiveness. I think those.
I can end on this note
God,
too.
so cute.
Yeah.
The very beginning on page 8 when she it says
God,
by the late
that's
19th
so
century
cool.
British goshawks were extinct.
Yeah.
And then this paragraph, but in the 1960s and 1970s, falconers started a quiet, unofficial scheme to bring them back. The British Falconers Club worked out that for the cost of importing a goshawk from the continent for falconry, you could afford to bring in a second bird and release it, buy one, set one free. It wasn't a hard thing to do with a bird as self-reliant and predatory as a goss. You just found a forest and opened the box. Like-minded falconers started doing this all over Britain. The hawks came from Sweden, Germany, and Finland. Most were huge, pale taiga forest gosses. Some were released on purpose, some were simply lost. They survived, found each other, and bred secretly and successfully. Today their descendants number around 450 pairs. Elusive, spectacular, utterly at home. The fact of these British goshawks makes me happy. Their existence gives the lie to the thought that the wild is always something untouched by human hearts and hands. The wild can be human work. I had so many feelings about that paragraph because it felt like we wouldn't have to fix things if we didn't break them in the first place, and I had a lot of conflicting feelings about that.
We suck, chat. Not people in general. You guys don't
Yeah.
suck.
And on that note,
No.
And it just really is one of those things that's really hard now when you think about conservation and when you think about how much humans are getting involved, should get involved, shouldn't get involved, you know, all of the costs of just humans being humans and what we've done to those natural spaces. And the thought that, you know, we could bring them back, you know, right what we've wronged, just made me feel a lot of things.
Yeah. A lot of feelings there.
There's a lot of
That
feelings.
was a really good passage to close it with.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one completely. I have it marked up.
Yeah, that was the first thing I underlined. And I was
Yeah.
like, shit.
Nice. Lindsay, I'll look at these and we'll put them on the wheel for next month, I think. Because right now we have...
I honestly forgot that I was a thing, and then
Yeah, no, it's fine. Space.
Spin the wheel.
Can you spin the wheel?
excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
We have what books are on the wheel. I will tell you right now.
I had a lot of fun
Oh,
discussing it.
fancy.
Yeah,
I liked,
that was cool.
I think that was my favorite part of this entire experience so far.
On the wheel, we have a most remarkable creature. Which one is that? Is that the vulture or
It's
the
about
octopus?
caracaras.
Oh,
So you're seeing all that, I'm like, how are you
remarkable
reading that?
creature is
Okay,
me with
Okay.
a-
Oh,
most
well,
remarkable
we spun
feature.
it. It landed on that.
remarkably
It's about
bright
character.
creatures is the octopus.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice. Okay.
Remarkably bright creatures, an immense world. That one's mine. That one's about like how different animals have different senses and how they all experience the world super
Ooh.
differently. The private life of an unloved bird.
That's the vulture one.
Vulture book. Don't shoot the dog. Training classic. And Steve and Me, which just like we
Oh.
already
We're gonna
stayed
cry
on the
some
sad
more.
train.
Oh,
Yeah.
dang.
About,
Okay.
Anyway,
Let's keep our tears
about
coming.
Dad's dying. It's crazy. That's Connor's rec.
Connor, why would you do
It's
this?
a really good book.
Did
I
anyone
haven't
else
read it. I would
appreciate
like to
her
read it.
being like, every book I ever read about an animal ended with the animal dying?
Oh,
Oh.
that was the thing.
I didn't know Mabel died!
yeah, I didn't either. No,
Not
Jeff.
for many
At Harry
seasons,
Potter,
I
yeah.
know,
I know, but still.
Harry Potter has
Spin
animals.
the wheel. Spin the wheel.
Spin it.
Spin the wheel.
It's happening.
Spin
We're on a
the
John's
wheel.
probably gonna see it
Oh,
before.
we already-
You
The
can
wheel.
submit
That's not the
suggestions.
spin,
It'll
don't
just
worry.
be for next week.
Next week.
Next month.
Go ahead.
Not next week.
Spinning.
Marley
What is
and
it?
me. No. Old
Not
Yeller.
put
No.
pressure on us.
No dogs can die.
Where did it land on?
It hasn't spun yet.
Okay, there we
Oh,
go.
it's done. It's spinning.
I know. I also was
Spinning.
like, wait. Oh my God, Lord.
Oh, look at my phone.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
What is it?
Another
Oh
bird.
my god.
Oh my god.
It is the most remarkable creature!
I thought
A
it was gonna
most
land on
remarkable
I feel like we really
creature.
manifested that.
Yeah, we did, baby.
Wait, okay, this one's about Cara.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, I
is-
thought this was the
I've
Vulture
never
one.
read it, but
No,
I
this
just
is
really
about
want
Stripe.
to.
I think
yeah.
striated caracaras.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Mark
Yeah.
said birds, and more freaking birds. Another bird
ready
book,
for it,
everybody. All right,
I'm
chat.
so excited.
Check out your local libraries. Check out audiobooks. If you are going to be purchasing this book new,
Great,
we do
another
have
bird.
affiliate
It's
links
helping
on
you get
our
over your fear of
website,
birds.
so you can
One book at a
purchase
time.
the book if you would like to join book club this month.
Mr.
Bird
Hurdles
Club.
is going to be
Bird
exposure
Club.
therapy
It's
for
a
you.
bird club.
I'm not sad about it.
Thanks for coming to
This
book
was
club,
a book about
everyone.
grief, okay? Featuring birds.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming to book club.
Care, baby.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
reading. Happy reading.
Love
Read
you.
the book this time.